Hello, 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 and welcome to the Blue Oval Podcast. I am Ben Weissman, and joining me, as always, Garrett Zatlin. How's it going, man?
Ben, the reason why everyone should be subscribing on YouTube is so that you can now see my new digs. My new apartment that has nothing on the walls yet. I'm still waiting for my headboard. Still waiting to put up pretty much everything. Put away all my stuff. So, yeah. So if anyone is listening and you hear some kind of bizarre sound, I blame my new neighbors because I don't know who they are, and it's easier to blame them for that. So, thank you again, Ben, for being flexible today. Appreciate it.
We've had a couple like sizable changes to our recording spaces over the
Yeah.
past couple months. I mean, I went from home to the office. You're in a new place. We're really changing it up. So yeah, the loyal YouTube followers will have noted all our different moves at this point.
Yeah, who knew that Garrett's great adventures of where he's moving apartments to is become a niche here. But things that I didn't see were new ratings and reviews. That was disappointing. Nothing on Apple, nothing on Spotify. We got a handful of subscribers on YouTube, so continue to go follow there. But hey, 5 stars, ratings and reviews, that would be fantastic. Otherwise, I'm gonna let that be.
I'm a little insulted that we didn't get any after came back to the podcast, but
Right.
we'll slide by that real quick because we got bigger and better things to talk about, and that of course is our reactions to the regional lists that were sent out, the reactions to all the scratches that we saw or didn't see in some cases, which was really interesting. Why don't we start with again one of the biggest names in our sport, and that is Parker Valby. She decides to do both the 5K and 10K, doing the double. Not necessarily shocking, but we did think that there was a possibility she would run one, more specifically the 5K, instead of putting a 5K and 10K on her legs before going to the Olympic trials. But with Florida needing the team points, it does make a lot of sense that she is going to be running in both of those events and should be a heavy, heavy favorite in both of those to get 20 points for the Gators. As an NCAA podcast, this makes 100% everything lines up. As someone who is going to be watching the Olympic trials very closely, I do wonder if this is necessarily the best option for Valby moving forward.
I bet you it's this. I bet you it's Florida saying like, "Hey, we're on the 10K," and then depending on what happens at the team standings
Sure.
at the NCAA championships, just medically scratch whichever one. Just if you don't want to run your second event, you get a medical waiver and you're okay to keep your first medal or whatever it was. So I feel like that could potentially be a scenario that happens. Yeah, I think we thought that this could happen. I'm not like totally shocked by any means. I think on one hand, you go, man, she has a history of injury.
Yep.
You are at the most important time of the year. Why are we putting this much miles on her when, we're just trying to get her fresh at this point? But then on the counter side is she's never been healthier. She's never been fresher. So, why would we not take advantage of it? At some point, like the whole point of this sport is to race. You must race. So I'm a little torn. I don't know if I like this. Do you like it?
Again, from a purely collegiate aspect, I do, because we get to see her race and I want to see her win titles and throw down these awesome performances. But on the other hand, she's going to be running 30K worth of races over like a couple week span right before what is ostensibly the biggest races of her like career at this point, which would be the Olympic trials. So I don't love it. Like this seems a little short sighted, and like obviously as a college coach, you're trying to maximize what's best for your team. But as someone who's supposed to be like watching out for her and making sure that she's ready to go and to make an Olympic team, I don't know if that's happening necessarily. And that's, I'm not saying that's not the right decision, like what they ended up making, but those two things are very much at odds with each other, in my opinion. And I think it's hard to decipher until we see her run those races, until we see her at Olympic trials, it's going to be hard to know what the right decision was.
I think it's a lose-lose. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to blame anyone for whatever their decision was on this one. It's either, go for the double. I mean, if she wins this double, and she would very heavily be favored to do so,
Yeah.
if she wins the double, like, you're now putting her in some like really interesting territory among like the all-time greats, right? And not only that, but it's like, Florida needs the team points. I think there are a reasonable number of like reasons why you would go after it. At the same time, it's like, man, that the trials, man. Now it's only a month, I get it, but I don't blame anyone necessarily for that. Here's one that I think though that we might
Sure.
have a little bit more contention with. I want to switch off here. Kai Robinson. He's going to be scratching the 10K for the 5K. Now, I thought he would go for the 10K, 5K double.
Yep.
He does not. I don't have an issue with him not doubling. That's not the issue I don't have. The issue that I have, however, is choosing the 5K over the 10K and scratching out of the 10K. To me, makes no sense. I have no idea why that was done. The 5K has Nico Young and Parker Wolf in it. And you know that they're not running the 10K because Parker Wolf's time isn't fast enough to get a regional qualifier, and Nico never actually had a time that worked for him. So I struggle to understand, like, why would you go into the race that is harder to win a national title in, whereas the 10K, it's like Hobtum Samuel and maybe like one other guy, but Samuel's the only guy who I would really see be threatening Kai Robinson, and that's where I struggle to balance the two.
Yeah, from that perspective, I think you're absolutely right. There really is no reason to favor the 5K over the 10K. The 10K is certainly his best shot at winning another NCAA title. He's clearly proven that he can win a title in that event before. The thing I keep coming back to is this just a personal preference? Is this preparation for, again, like more international racing? It really, like, those are the only things that I can think of, because from a purely on the track at the NCAA meet, this makes zero sense. And I completely agree with you. And it's a shame because I think the 10K with Kai Robinson in it is a much more interesting race. Like, I think he makes that race a really fascinating tactical battle, because that I think forces Samuel to really push it from the gun to try to like run the kick out of him. But now I don't know necessarily who he's going to be fearing in the 10K with Nico Young not running it, with Robinson not running it. It seems like it's very much opened up for him to kind of run the race that whatever kind of race he wants to run, and still probably end up with a win.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, now with him out of it, that's really the biggest part of all of this is, not really what Robinson could or could not done, but you take him out now, it's Hoptum's race.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how I don't know how he's gonna lose that race. I just don't. Like, I mean, let's go through the list and try to figure out, who, let's just say let's say the men's West region. I'll list the first couple guys here. Ernest Churio, Evan Jenkins, Will Smith, Evans Kiplagat, Ben Perrin, Adisu Guiada.
No.
I mean, Alex Mayer's in there. He hasn't exactly been electric this season. Aaron Las Harris is in there. Joey Noakes. I mean, but it's just not guys who I'm like super, like, if I'm him now personally, I would be scared to race any one of those guys. But if I'm Hoptum, I'm just not. And so, like, here, let me see about the East region, right? If you go further down there, the guys are like Alex Phillip, who's good, but he's just not nearly at that level.
At that level. No.
Victor Kiprop, Tom Brady, Will Anthony, Perry McKinnon, Florian Lepelec.
Yeah, Victor Kiprop's like the only guy that you feel like could at least maybe hang. But and maybe one of those, like maybe Aaron Los Harris or somebody like one of the BYU guys, like someone who's just like comes from a more aerobic powerhouse, like they can just hang. But I just don't think they're going to be able to last as long as Samuel can.
No, no, and that's the thing there. So I'm glad you agree, because it's again, I'm not necessarily like upset at his decision, but I just don't understand it. Like if someone can justify it and understand why Robinson scratches the 10K, I'm open ears, you know. And the other counter I want to point to this is, well, Garrett, he did the 10K, 5K double at Pac-12, so, and it was at altitude, so surely, he just wants to give his legs more of a rest, which is fine if that's the case. But also, like, I want to go back real quick and just take a look at those Pac-12 like final standings. Kai Robinson scored 20 points between just himself, and Stanford scored 34 points overall for last place in the men's team standings. So, like, if I'm
save Stanford, it for the NCAA meet.
Yeah, like, did you think that you were going to be a top 3 team, top 5 team? Because that's what throws me off. It's like, why run him that much and that hard if the end result is last by 16 points?
Because remember last year at NCAAs, Stanford did quite well, like with 3 guys, I think, scoring. Like obviously Robinson had 20, but like they put together a pretty respectable finish at the national meet.
They were third with 44 points.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Like I agree. I think if you're going to do that, do it when it actually matters the most, or if you have a conference title on the line, which that was certainly not the case.
Yeah. So, all right, that's just me. I'm moving off of that. Where do you want to go next?
Let's go to the Oregon duo of Solana Ayyildiz and Maddie Elmore, opting to do the 5K instead of the 15. Now, for Ayyildiz, I think this makes a lot of sense. I think this is, despite her really good 1,500 meter performances as of late, I think that 5K earlier in the season was kind of a light bulb moment for me. And I think this is where she ultimately is her best.
Sorry, who's this? Are you saying Ayyildiz?
Ayyildiz, okay. Yeah. For Elmore, this is a little bit of a head scratcher for me. Like she's been one of the best 1,500 meter runners now. She hasn't been as great over the last month or so, but this has always seemed like her best event. And from a more macro perspective, I'm curious your thoughts on this. I was thinking about this a lot this afternoon. So you have 2 heavy favorites, or you have a heavy favorite in each of these events. You have a heavy Valby in the 5K, you have Ramsden in the 15, right? If you're saying that it's very unlikely that you're going to win either of those, let's just posit that because of the heavy favorites. Which race do you think is going to be run to your benefit more? And the way Valby's going to run the 5K is like super fast and from the gun, and that's probably how the rest of the field is going to end up being strung out. It's basically going to be a time trial, right? Whereas the 15, Ramsden doesn't necessarily always push the pace. Like they could be a little bit like there could be more unevenness, some unpredictability, because it's just not going to be a straight time trial race. And because of that, I think the 15 just provides, maybe it's a deeper field, but there's just more potential because you just never know what's going to happen at 15. With a 5K, I know Valby, if she runs it, is just going to take it out fast, and then basically whoever's the fittest on that day is going to finish second to her. Like and maybe they just feel very confident in their ability to run that type of race. I kind of like the idea of doing the 1,500 where there's a little bit more variability.
I see where you're coming from. Initially, I didn't like this for either of them. I looked this up. I go like, why? But look at the West region, and it's Elmore Ayyildiz at 15:15, Hertenstein at 15:18. Then it goes Thorvaldsen and Cherubet at 15:25, and a slew of women above 15:30. Like it's definitive that Elmore and Ayyildiz are pretty much the best 1-2 in the West region, right? So, and then you go to the 5K on the East region. I'm sure it's probably a little bit different here as I'm struggling to to pull up the results and try to find them. But the whole point stands is like, I think from an All-American standpoint, the 5K has more wide open spots than the 1500 does. I would argue that. You also then said, hey, I think Elmore, I'm more surprised because I think, the 15 was kind of for more bread and butter. I think the 15 is the bread and butter for both Ayyildiz and Elmore. I think that's just the key event. The difference, though, is that Elmore has proven that she has more aerobic base than Ayyildiz before. Like, Ayyildiz has never run under 16 unconverted times.
Right.
Other than that 15-15 mark. And so for me, that was the one where I go like, I'm like, will she get out of the West region? Probably. But I don't know if it's like nearly as much of a chance of being like an All-American in the 5K as much as it is like the 15. I mean, maybe it's a little bit more, but I don't know. I still, at the end of the day, don't totally mind it because the 5K to me feels a bit more wide open from an All-American perspective. But do I love this decision? Not necessarily. No, I don't hate it, but I don't love it either.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like we're both of a little bit of two minds with this, where these both of these women, we've seen them as 1500-meter runners for so long. I think it really just depends on how you view the fields of each of these respective events, and clearly the Oregon coaching staff believes that the 5K is more gettable and that they're prepared for that type of race at NCAAs. And I mean, far be it from me to question them if they believe so, and they know their athletes better than we do. But it is just an interesting decision to kind of, and we've seen this before, right? Where like coaches will put athletes in their non-traditional events because of like just the overall strength of particular fields. And we've seen a lot of examples of that, and we can think of maybe the men's 800 this last indoor season where that has not quite worked out. And you take athletes out of their comfort zone, and especially in a 5K where you're gonna have to run it like I mean you're not only gonna have to put one good 5K down, you're gonna put down two, right? In regionals and at nationals. So I have a lot of hesitation there, but at the end of the day, I'm gonna trust that the Oregon coaching staff knows what's best for these athletes.
Yeah, to be very clear, I still trust most of these coaches more than I do my own self. That's why I'm not a coach, right? But there are just some like in this specific decision, I'm okay being like, okay, listen, maybe they just they know better this one. Other decisions, like we've already talked about,
sure,
I just don't understand them. So I can at least understand this. Real quick, let's just quickly go over here to Nico.
Mm-hmm.
Scratches 15, scratches 8. Didn't have technically a 10K qualifying time. Goes all in for the 5K.
This always seemed like the most likely outcome, and I think it's smart. Like all the things we mentioned about Valby, about like not trying to push to do too much at NCAAs before the Olympic trials. I think Nico Young, obviously, without having not really pushing for that 10K qualifier that would have counted, I think makes a lot of sense to not put that in his legs. And he's going to be a heavy favorite in the 5K. He's going to be able to cruise probably through regionals quite easily. And then you're talking about one like hard effort for him, which he was probably going to do anyway in preparation for the Olympic trials. So I think this makes a lot of sense for him, and he should be, I mean, he'll be fresh. He'll be fresher than a lot of these other guys he's racing against, and he's better. This should be a slam dunk for him.
Totally agree. I have nothing more to add. I'm moving us on. Juliet Cherubet, the freshman from Texas Tech, she had run 15:25 earlier this season. She was a cross-country All-American. I think you and I both viewed her as a heavy aerobic-centric runner. Then she wins the 1500 Big 12 title in 4:09 over some really good names. She's trying the 1500 5K double. Do you like this?
Yeah, I really don't hate it. As a freshman who isn't seen as like a a favorite in either of these events. I don't hate getting the experience in both of these. I think going through going through regionals, going through the 1500-meter rounds, it's going to be tough to make it out of both of those to nationals, even for how good she is. But I think ultimately it'll be great experience, and I think she has a great chance at least getting out of one, getting to nationals. She won't have to do both of them more than likely, and she'll be able to really hone in on one of those. And maybe we'll learn a little. Maybe she'll learn little bit about herself too through this process of maybe she's able to compete in the 1500 at a level that we didn't expect. Maybe we realize that she does need to bump up and stick in the 5K when it comes to the postseason. I just think at this point in her career, I think getting more races under her belt, getting more experience is never a bad thing.
I don't love this. I don't think I like it. I think there is way more evidence to say that she's an aerobic centric runner, like a true long distance runner, than 1500. Yes, her win was impressive. It was great. But she's run 8:57 in the 3K, 15:25 in the 5K. She's gotten a 33:40 something conversion as part of like a weekend double that was a very comfortable win for her over 10K. And she's a cross country All-American who had a great overall season, So I look at this and I go, wow, that 1500 was great, really impressive. But the 5K All-American spots are going to be easier to get than the 1500. And while you can do both of them, it's going to be like her best event at All-American is probably the 5K. I'm not even totally sold that she'll get out of the rounds into the 1500 meter finals at the national meet. And even if you say, okay, well, then she has the 5K to lean back on. Well, okay, but then she's still tired. She's not going to have fresh legs. I can maybe see this doing it sometime down the line, like later in her career. I just didn't think it was necessary. I thought it took away from her upside in the 5K. Now, look, could she be an All-American in the 1500? Sure. Her recent result says she can. Yeah. That's undeniable. She can. But I think in terms of weighing the probability of your best possible result, the 5K going all in made more sense. And I think there was clear evidence to suggest that was very clearly the case.
I think if you look at it through the lens of what's the way we can maximize her point total at nationals this year, I agree with you. I think picking one event, and in particular the 5K, certainly would have been the move. I think if you look at it through a little bit of a wider lens of just giving her the experience and giving her the opportunity, and honestly, just true. Like as a coaching staff showing her that this is not a good idea, because I don't doubt that she probably was pushing. Like as an athlete, you always want to run, right? You want to run as much as you can, especially when you've done nothing but be very successful as soon as you enter the NCAA. You just believe you can do it. So I think there obviously could be an element of that, and she's not an established star. She's not an established favorite in either of these events. If she was, then I think this becomes a much more indefensible decision. But where she's at right now, I'm completely fine with it.
Okay. I guess from a more, I guess from a less myopic point of view, what's the opposite of myopic? Is it, I don't know.
Gosh, singular.
I don't know. I was going to try to Google it, but I don't care enough for now. So I'm going to move off of that. But yeah, I mean, look, she's a stud. Like, she's going to be a major problem. We're going to rank her very highly in our cross country rankings in the summer. And I'm excited to see her run. I just feel way more comfortable if it was all in for the 5K. But I think she makes the national meet. That's not the issue. It's just, does she make it in both? Is she an All-American in both? Just one? Any? So we'll see. Where do you want to go next?
Let's stick in the 5K region, and let's talk about Margot Appleton deciding to go with the 5K over the 15. This was a little curious to me as well, but we have seen Appleton have a good track record of running good 5Ks. Again, I will express all my same concerns about you're running in a Parker Valby 5K rather than like a traditional 5K where her speed, I think, is much more of an asset. But the 1500 meter is loaded, and I don't hate getting out of that in an event where maybe you just have a better shot at being sixth than another event.
Yeah, I mean the East region, like we've gone over this where the 5K. Oh, I'm thinking 10K. Never mind, I take that back. The 5K I'm still not necessarily though like I don't think I think compared to the 15 it's not quite as deep. I'm not saying it isn't deep, but you think about the women who are going to be doubling back, like Cherubet, like Valby, although Valby will still just
It's
run
really
through.
not that deep. Like
Yeah,
you scroll through
yeah.
this, I mean, you got some women in the 1530s, but it's not an overwhelming amount.
And that's what I'm saying. It's like I don't like I don't necessarily think it's an issue that Margot Appleton goes after the 5K. What I what I kind of I don't necessarily have an issue with her in the 5K, but when I look at her history, I go, all right, so you've been an All-American 4 times, 3 individually, once in a DMR. All 4 of those times, if you include her DMR mile leg, according to
Right.
Tifers, she's been a 1,500 a mile All-American. So to then step away and deviate from that, I thought was an interesting decision. But then if you look at how all the women are, who aren't going to be fresh, or how light that 5K field is compared to other fields, yeah, I guess it makes sense, but I wasn't necessarily expecting it, especially after how good she looked at ACCs.
Yeah, I think a lot of what we said about Ayyildiz and Elmore applies to Appleton. Very similar runner as both of them. Has the ability to run well in the 5K, but is very much a 1,500 meter runner at heart, you would have to say. And I think it comes down to just strength of field and as well as your confidence in your ability to run a time trial like 5K. Like I think those are the two biggest factors, right? I mean, if you feel like
Yep.
you can just run a 15:20 at the national championships, then there's really no reason not to do the 5K, right? Like it's a lot. There's a lot less moving factors, a lot less variables in those kind of 5K races with Valby than there are in a 1500, where you can run 4:10 and finish ninth, or you could run 4:10 and finish second. Like you just the 1500 is so unpredictable.
Yeah, I would agree. Again, I think you and I are kind of echoing each other's sentiments here of
Yeah.
basically like, okay, maybe not the first decision we would have made, but also like hardly a poor decision. And really, in the grand scheme of things, it might end up being the better decision anyways. Let's talk about Lindsey Butler, and then I'm going to throw some rapid fire yes or no's
Yeah.
at you. Lindsey Butler scratches the 800 in favor of the 1500. She's run 407 for 1500 meters this season. She's run 202, but didn't look great at ACCs, had a few up and downs. I assume we like this, right?
I do. All the things we've said about the 1500 meter field still apply, but the 800 is just as loaded. Like it's not as if you're picking like a weaker or stronger field when you're comparing the two of those. And she's just looked more comfortable. Like it's crazy to say this about her at like a national champion in 800, but she just looks more comfortable in the longer distances at
Yes,
the
she
20
does.
and the 15/mile. And so I think you choose whatever you're more comfortable with, and for her it looks like it's the 15.
Yeah, I'd agree. I don't really have a whole lot more there. What benefits her more, an aggressive race or a tactical race?
I think a tactical still.
Okay.
Just her experience, but two, she's able to hold position in a little bit of a better way than I think a lot of these other women in the field. And
Mm-hmm.
obviously you throw in the 800 speed that she possesses.
Yeah, I don't disagree. All right, moving us on to some rapid fires. Here's a handful of other ones here that I'm going to throw at you, and you just tell me whether you like it or not.
Will do.
Sadie Sargent opting out of the 1500 meters in favor of the 5000 meters. Yes or no?
I liked it.
Excellent. Among these, was it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 men? These 6 men scratched out of the 5K to be all in fresh for the 10K. Which one do you think made the best decision? Karami Yago of Arkansas, Patrick Kiprop of Arkansas, Evan Jenkins of Washington, Dennis Kipnigetich of Oklahoma State, Alex Phillip of North Carolina, and Victor Kiprop of Alabama. Who are you like, yeah, that was probably the best decision for you?
I think either Patrick or Victor Kiprop. I think those are the two guys that like they have the just maybe highest end top end ability, and they could really go after the 10K. Whereas like the rest of those guys, I obviously are supremely talented, but I don't know if they can quite reach the heights that those two guys can in the 10K, and for them to focus more on that, I like that decision. I mean, really, I like it for all of them. Like I don't hate it at all.
Okay, we'll take that. I would have said Evan Jenkins because he's proven that he's talented, can be competitive.
Yeah, I just for Jenkins, like I think the experience thing is like I would just have liked to have seen him run as many races as he could at this point.
Interesting. Okay. Juliet Whitaker scratches out a 15 for 800. We like that.
Perfect.
Elliot Cook defers the 800 in favor of the 1500. We like that, I assume.
I do. That Pac-12 race is just stuck in my brain, and I really want to see that again at NCAA's.
Bailey Herdenstein of Colorado scratches the 10K in favor of the 5K. Thoughts?
Just it doesn't make a ton of sense. This is the move of someone like preparing for the Olympic trials, but I don't think that's necessarily where her focus should be at this point in her career. I think she should just be trying to score as many points, put herself in as many good positions at the national championship as she can.
I would have just said that I think the 10K is just not as good. And even if she has a slower C time, I still don't think it matters. I think she's still fit enough to be competitive in that space. That's largely what I would have said. But
yeah.
Jenna Hutchins, BYU, scratching out the 5K in favor of the 10K.
Yeah, like it for a lot of the same reasons that you just mentioned.
Kang Neok of Northern Arizona. I'll just get ahead of this. I don't understand. Did you read this?
Yeah, I don't get that. I agreed with all your analysis.
He scratches out of the 1500 in favor of the 5K. He has a converted 339 mark this season. He says the 11th best runner in the West region before scratches. Over 5,000 meters, he's the 47th seed before scratches. Even if his conversion was 3 seconds slower in the 1500, he'd still be listed higher before scratches in the 15 than he would the 5K, and yet he's choosing the 5K. And I don't understand that at all.
This feels like NAU just wanting to load up the 5K with as many guys as they can, and they're just like, hey, just run with your teammates, and we're going to try to get as many guys in as we can. That's the only... Because a bunch of those guys ran well, like really good 1500 meters, a couple weeks ago. I don't understand why some of them didn't stick, especially in New York, where you just laid out the discrepancy in where he stands with the rest of the NCAA in both those events, or with the rest of the West Regional in both those events.
Yeah, I didn't totally understand that one. California Baptist duo Matias Renega and Valentin Soka, they scratch the 1500 despite having 339 conversions, but they will each do the 10K, 5K double, I believe. I think both of them will.
I like that. The 15s loaded. Neither of those guys were going to be super competitive. You give yourselves two different shots in events that aren't nearly as loaded. I think it's a no-brainer.
I would agree with you there. And then we'll wrap it up with, I just lost my page. There we go. Oh, actually, no, I take that back. One more. Kiara Carter of Lipscomb takes the 15 instead of the 8. She's run 202 this season. Her 15 is 414. She's ranked significantly higher in the 800 than the 15. I didn't understand this one.
Yeah, I get the lack of understanding, and it doesn't make sense when you look at it on paper. But I think again, it's a comfort thing. I think if you feel more comfortable running the 15 than the 8, I think you just go with what you feel like your main event is. Like in my perspective, I think I probably was higher or equally like as high on the performance list when it was in the 8 versus the 15. The 8 was very, very much like significantly weaker in my year. I probably had a little bit of a better chance to run in the 8, but I just hadn't run a ton of 8s. Wasn't super comfortable in that going into the postseason compared to the 15, where it felt a lot more comfortable.
Well, let's take a look, shall we? You were 36 in the East region over 1,500 meters in 2021. And over 800 meters, you were... What did you run specifically? Do you know?
149 something.
149, yeah. You were 67th.
Okay. All right. Point.
So
not a great analogy. I thought I was higher up, but I remember that
very
year.
Selfish of you. Very pompous.
Yeah. I remember that year you could run like 148, and you were like basically locked in for nationals that year, and it was like, wow, that is way different than you needing to run sub 340.
That's true. Yeah. No, it was. I remember that year. I mean, that was the first year where everything was like, oh,
yeah,
it's this fast. All right. And I think, Amaris Tanisma chooses 10K over 5K.
Yeah, I wouldn't have hated to see her do both, but if you're gonna pick one, I like that she picked the 10K.
I did too. Oh, by the way, Maya Ramsden, who ran 4:02 at the LA Grand Prix over 1,500 meters, is now coming back to do regionals and nationals. And not only is she doing the 15, but she's doing the 15 5K double. Why?
Which, like, we talked about on lane 9 with her. I don't think she really loves doing that double.
She doesn't. You spoke to her. She doesn't like doing it. Which makes no sense.
Yeah, I don't get it.
I think what happens is that you could start playing with the numbers in your head and you go, all right, so Maya, is the champion in the 15. Then let's say Victoria Bossong and Sofia Gordiaran run really well. And then Ramsden scores again in the 5K. Maybe there's someone else out there in the women's side who we don't know about who's really competitive for Harvard. I guess I can see from that perspective. That's another one of those where I wouldn't be totally shocked if she just like, I mean,
she's got a long summer ahead of her too. Like, yeah, I don't love that.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, that's it. That's all I've got. I think we're all set to go. I know this is one of our shorter episodes, but that's just what happens. We do have some NCAA news, but we're going to hold that off until the summer. In the meantime, go check out this site. We're going to have regional predictions, as in we predict, me, Mara, and Finn are going to predict our 12 individuals, every distance event, each region, men and women, to see who we believe will qualify for nationals. That's out by the time you're listening to this. D2, D3 previews with All-American predictions there. We'll have regional reactions. We're going to do NCAA previews and predictions. And you know the whole story. We've got Utah State Championship interviews on YouTube, and just a whole other bunch of stuff that you just got to go check out the site for. So, Ben, that is all I got.
All right. Well, until next week, Garrett, I'll talk to you.
I'll talk to you.